a conversation about home. And in this conversation, well, featured in this conversation, you're all going to be in the conversation, but is a member of the CHP team, a peer support worker who delivers post-homelessness support, a child counsellor supporting Aboriginal children and people who've had the experience of not having a home. And all of them are going to explore the concept of home, what it means, and, you know, unpick why it is so fundamental to our sense of well-being. So as I said, it's great to have you all here, and the numbers will keep growing over the next little while, I think. And Cass is going to, the team leader of our peer education and support program, PESP, is going to facilitate the conversation and introduce you to the panel. But firstly, I'm going to hand over to Shayla Bawden, who we're delighted will provide an acknowledgement of country.
Thank you very much, Jenny. Hi, everyone. Just a little brief introduction. My name is Shayla Bawden, and I'm the Children's Counsellor. I work with Aboriginal children in the family violence space and also in the out-of-home care space. I am a proud Aboriginal woman. I am still currently on my journey finding my mob, finding my people, but I would just like to quickly say that we acknowledge all the traditional custodians on the vast and widespread lands in which we all work, live and play at the moment, as we know that the world isn't exactly what it used to be. And so we acknowledge that there are many lands in which we meet on today. I will acknowledge my land as the Wurundjeri territory, and I would just like to recognise their continuing connection to the land, water and community. We pay our respect to elders past, present and emerging, and I extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that we have with us today. And I thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Shayla. And thank you, Jenny. So I might just go into introducing how today is going to work. We'll do a little bit of an overview of that. So as mentioned, we're going to explore the concept of home with all of our esteemed panellists. The way that we're going to run this is that we've got themes that the panellists have brought out in their discussions while we were planning this event. At the end of each theme, at the end of each theme, we're going to report back any comments that are in the chat that are sort of strongly making a mention. So we encourage you to use the chat function, which will be at the bottom of your screen. It looks like a little talking bubble. And to make comments in there and to let Ian know. Ian will be moderating it. So let him know if you actually want to come on video and make your own comment rather than him report it back. We will go through each of the themes. We ask that you have your mics off unless you are reporting back a comment at the end of those themes. And please note that the session is being recorded. So if you would not like to appear in that recording, that you can choose to have your camera off.
Cass, can I also just suggest people have remember, as Cass said, their mics off are helpful, but works best for speaker view. If you'll have the option up in the right-hand corner of gallery view or speaker view, and for this, speaker view will work best because the person speaking will appear on your screen. Otherwise, it'll be a bit hard to work out in gallery view who's actually talking.
Yes, thank you. So now I'd like to go ahead and introduce our panellists. So we have two members of the current Peer Education Support Program, which I'm going to here on refer to as PESP for the sake of time. So we have Matthew Stuart and Lisa Townsend. You there too?
Hi.
We have two graduate members of our Peer Education Support of PESP. Jody Letts. You there, Jody? Jody, you there?
Yeah.
I heard her there for a sec.
She's there, she's just on mute.
Right, I followed Ian's thing and went to the other thing, but it wouldn't let me turn my own mic on, but that's all right. What I know.
Thanks. And Joal Presincula.
Hi.
Hi, who is also a peer support worker with Launch Housing. Welcome. We've got Aliya Ahmad, who is our Senior Media Advisor at CHP.
Hello.
Hello, you didn't come up.
Oh.
There you are. And Shayla Bawden, who you've already met, who is the Children's Counsellor for Boondawan Healing Centre. Thank you. Welcome, and thank you for joining us. And thank you everyone in the audience for joining us today. It's a fantastic turnout. So we're going to go into our exploration of the panelists' thoughts. It's wonderful to have such a diverse panel to be able to explore the concept of home during Homelessness Week. So I'm going to start the first question asking all of you to answer it. And to please share your thoughts on what a home means to you. And Shayla, I've got you up on my screen, so we might start with you if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the notion of home means something different to everyone, but we can all kind of correlate those similarities into what we believe home is. Home to me, it comes from many different aspects. I think for today's purpose, I really want to bring in more of a cultural space and representing the children that I work with and what home really means for them. But I can also relate to those things. So for me, home is it's safety, it's comfort, it's having things familiar around you. It's not a building, it's not 4 walls and a roof. It's a feeling. I think home is more definitely a feeling, and that's something that I think will really portray today, and a lot of people will begin to understand what that means. But I'll let the others kind of continue off from there because I know that there's a lot to be said.
Thank you. I really like that comment about it being a feeling and more than the bricks and mortar. And I think you're right that a lot of people will be able to relate to that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So Aliya is the next on my little screen. Could I get you to go next?
Yeah, I mean, I think really similar to sort of what Shayla said as well. I've grown up and moved around like 7 different countries. So for me, home has been less of, one specific building, but it's been being around community and being around family. My family's originally from Pakistan. So it's being surrounded by, you know, that kind of familiarity culturally. Which gives a sort of, it's about having that warmth and comfort. I think for me, being like, that's what I think of when I'm sort of like, I'm home, is when I'm around familiar cultural things or familiar family.
Yeah, there's certainly a theme popping up there with the both of you already, isn't there? It's that thread of feeling and how you feel when you're home. And again, it being more than just that building that you're in.
Yeah.
Thank you, Aliya. That's a really great contribution. Jody, you're next up on my screen. Do you mind going next?
For me, I'm transient as well with my employment. So moving every couple of years, for me, I actually had to break that whole thought pattern of getting in, getting the job done and moving on, and never actually setting up something that was personal. So I always lived in a house, but I never actually had a home until a few years ago, where I started to make something that was more personalised.
And in that more recent time, have you felt a different sense of home now that you're in a space that you have personalised?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was more, everything was always sort of business orientated, whereas now I'm looking at the more emotional side of being at home, being with family and being connected to the community. So where it was more a sterile kind of business transaction, it's now something that is about my internal happiness. I
think that's a really lovely thing. And what a great sort of journey to be on, although somewhat late after that experience you have of the clinical side of it, if you like. Thanks, Jody. Joal, can I ask you to go next?
Hi. So home for me
I think it's probably a different concept to a lot of people's experience. Being someone with lived experience of homelessness and not always having a home, I know what it feels like to go without, you know, that basic bricks and mortar feeling as well of home. Also, now that I'm a peer support worker in the homelessness sector, and very proud to say the first peer support worker in Australia in the homelessness sector ever. I work with people also who live without a home and have been in the peer resettlement pilot project with CHP and Launch Housing, where I was peer support worker to those who have been long-term rough sleepers and then have just resettled into home. And so I'd like to bring their voice in today as well, if I could, to discuss what it's like for those who are still without a home and those who have just gotten a home and what that's like for them. So
Yeah,
homes here and there for me, it's a bit of everything.
Yeah, and that's right. Of course, today we will all bring a range of aspects to the conversation, because home is something that we all feel some sort of connection to and we have thoughts about, but it's also, it can be, you know, in reflection of our family's experience or our friends or people that we support and work with. So I absolutely encourage you to bring those perspectives to our conversation today.
Thanks, Cass.
Thank you. Matthew, you're the next on my screen.
Well, for me, home has been a lot of places where I've laid my head to go to sleep. But what resonates with me is that home is where your heart is. And that makes my heart go to all my boys, my families. So home for me is where my heart is, and that's with my family and my boys. So it doesn't matter where I lay my head, but I've got a spiritual or a inner kind of idea of home being where my heart is, and I'll leave it with that. Thanks.
No, classic quote, Matt. And every time you talk about that, it always makes me think of that wonderful festival that we used to have. And thank you for that. And we will explore the idea of the connection with family and home a little bit later on. I'll ask you to talk a bit more about that. Thanks. Lisa, you're actually not on my little tabs, but I'm sure you're there.
I'm here, but I just haven't got the camera on.
That's okay. Do you want to turn it on just while you're doing your bit here?
Yeah.
People can see your lovely face.
Hello. Yeah, for me at the moment, home, since we did the questions, home for me and my idea of home has flipped on its head. I'm sitting in a motel room in the midst of making my way to my home. Sorry, right on cue. Yeah, so I guess home for me is it's having the experience of sleeping rough and having nothing for so long, like Joel was saying. It's a learning curve, you know, like the paying the bills and the rent and the whole routine of home. It's a whole new learning curve. But yeah, at the moment it's limbo for me. I know the goal, I know what I want, and where I want to be, but yeah, the home picture I had in my home isn't home anymore. So, but I've got my dogs.
Yes.
I've got my dogs, and
yeah, and you will have a chance to talk about your pets. Can I ask you though, if you do think ahead, so picture yourself in that place where you want to be, in that home, like what will that mean to you?
Oh, so much. I think that it's a foundation that's going to enable me to do the things I want to do, to get back in contact with my kids. My dogs can live their life, you know, they can live a happy life. And just, yeah, I just that blissful little bubble, you know, it's something I want, it's something I've never had. I've always, when I have had a home, it's never been my home. I've always lived with someone else. I've never had my name on a lease. And I think it was why it was so hard to walk away from my home just now, because it's the first time I've had my name on a lease, and it was my home. But it's not the end of it. I know where I'm going. Yeah. Everything's a bit unclear for everyone at the moment with COVID.
Yeah.
So it's a bit frustrating. And it's day by day, like each day I have to work out, you know, what the next, but it's a journey, and it's one that I'm not going to let beat me.
Yeah, good on you.
Yeah, I will get there.
Yeah, you will get there. You're a strong fighter, and you'll keep going, and you're on a, you know, it's a difficult journey, but it's a positive one, because you will get that outcome in the end. All right. Well, you might want to, your bandwidth is low, so you might want to switch your video off for a little while until I come back to you. Yeah. Thanks, Lee.
Awesome. Yeah.
Much appreciated.
Thank you.
You look good in those headphones too. So we've come to the end of that first theme of home. Ian, are there any comments to flag?
No, but just a reminder, so people would like to, we'll be going through a number of themes now, and at the end of that theme, if anyone would like to share any of their thoughts on that theme, you can do so now about what your feeling is about home. Just let me know in the chat room, and I'll grab Cass, and but also any comments that you'd like to put, just encourage you to put them in the chat room, and anyone else who wants to respond to them, feel free. And I'll try to summarise them as we go through. Shane, thanks Lisa, yeah, it's been us too, and Shay as well. Thanks her as well for being able to come today, because when we were planning this, she was in a home, and so things were a little bit different, and now she's not. So it's fantastic that she's been able to make it today.
Absolutely, thank you. So we'll move on to the next theme that came up in our discussions, which was comfort. So as in weather like this, I think sometimes it makes you think about food, but we'll think of it in relation to home. So Matt, can I start with you? Could you talk to us about how your home provides you with comfort?
Yes, my home provides comfort in as much as I can shower regularly, I can sit on the couch, I can watch television, I have electricity, and the comfort I get from it is physical comfort as well as mental comfort. It's a place to go where you can turn off or relax, give time to your thoughts. There's comfort there as well, mental comfort, physical comfort, and in having a home now, I find comfort in having a good soft bed too.
In having a what? Sorry, can you say that again? Bed. Oh, a soft bed.
Good soft bed.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I really like what you said about it being more than physical comfort. Although, you know, we all love a good bed and whatnot. That idea that it's that mental relief sometimes, even if you've got that comfortable, safe place to go, that you can relax your brain and relax your emotions as well, and feel comfortable internally. That's a really good point, Matt. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'm going to ask the next question of you first, Jody. How do you create a sense of comfort in your home?
I think painting a picture for me, when I was living in the van, the space for me was small enough I felt really comfortable because I could control everything in it. There wasn't there wasn't too much going on. So, you know, I was able to have the windows and doors shut, and I could see everything and I could touch everything. And with all the things that were going on emotionally and so many competing priorities, it really just gave me a couple of things to deal with. You know, the food, the clothing, the blankets, and then some irreplaceable things like medals and jewelry and photos. But it felt quite contained. So in a sense, I was able to really feel comfortable because there was only a small amount of things to deal with on any one basis. But then after experiencing that homelessness, and I was given a transitional house, and it was this big empty cavity, I become really overwhelmed by all sorts of things that were more around not just how to fill that space, but how to keep myself safe in that space. So many doors, so many places that when you're going into somewhere new or somewhere familiar, you don't know the noises, or you don't know the bangs, or which one locks properly or which one doesn't lock. So I found that that was a very large void to fill before I started to feel comfortable with knowing how everything open and shut, and having everything in the right place. So things, I wasn't always looking over my shoulder and looking for the unexpected or feeling out of control in that environment. So for me, something small is manageable, but yeah, you start to expand that into something bigger. It starts to bring a lot of other things into play.
Yeah, and I know that I think you've done some amazing things in the place you're living now to make it comfortable for you, that you've had to adapt it to your own personal needs. You've done some amazing things in the garden. You've done some amazing renovations inside. Is that about comfort, or is it more about practicality?
I think there's a couple of different ways of looking at it, but for me, like I was just saying, I like to be in a small space. So whether I'm in my bedroom or whether I'm in the garden or whether I'm outdoor area, I have lots of different defined spaces. So there's 5 different defined spaces outside that I can go, and they're small enough just to be in that zone without actually allowing my mind to have to think about all sorts of other things. So I can channel myself to a small area and put that energy into thinking about that. Because part of my mental health is thinking too much and overthinking things. So to able to have a calm and relaxing life, I can just choose to be in one place or not. So a lot of effort's gone into to those kinds of things, so I can focus, whether it be on veggie gardens or whether it be on animals, or just to really keep myself grounded and keep myself focused and not get overwhelmed by everything.
Thank you. I think that's and I really like how you've been able to get a good insight into yourself and understand what you need to be comfortable and adapt your home to that. I think that's incredibly insightful and wise. Thank you, Jody. Joel, can I ask you to answer the same question? How do you create a sense of comfort in your home?
For me, I find comfort and a sense of home in my kids. You know, like I hug my kids and I feel like I'm at home. Just that belonging of my own little family, you know. I've got this little family that's just mine, that I've created, and that's my ultimate sense of comfort and home.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. And again, as I said, that we'll come to very shortly a bit more about family, to get you to talk more about that. But that's, you know, I like the idea that having a hug from the people you love that you created is your comfort. I think I wouldn't doubt that they would feel the same way, getting a cuddle from mum. Thanks, Joelle.
Thanks.
Lisa, I'm going to ask you to go next, if you don't mind. Hopefully your camera can withstand a question.
We'll try.
If not, we'll deal with just the microphone. How is home important to a sense of safety and security? I know I've heard you talk quite strongly about this before.
I think beside the obvious, you know, 4 walls, a roof, locked doors and locked windows, I think there's just that peace of mind that's your little safe bubble, you know. It's your little corner of the world that you can go into, and you don't have to watch your back, and you don't have to constantly be on guard about what's going on and whatnot. You can walk in, you shut the door behind you, and you shut out the world. And I think that yeah. Sorry.
I think Hood's joining in the conversation.
She's weighing. She's agreeing.
Thanks, Lisa. I appreciate that. You've said that in a beautiful kind of way. Oh, I think she must be frozen. Matt, can I ask you to answer that? And how?
Sorry.
That's okay. I'm just going to Matt now, if you don't mind, Lise. Matt, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, there you are. Can you talk about,
I'm here, Cassandra.
You've also talked about home being important to a sense of safety and security. Would you mind talking about that?
The importance of home, did you say?
Why a home is important to safety and security?
Oh, because you can lock the door and keep the bad guys out. It's important to safety. Home is important to safety because there's people in my life that aren't the most nicest blokes or the nicest people in the world, and I've been subject to a home invasion before. So the importance of home being safe and secure is a lot to me. Even though you can lock your door and keep people out, they can kick the door in, but at least you've got a place you can defend. I know I'm coming from a pretty tough line of thought, but that's where I've found home to be safe and secure. A lot more safe and secure than the streets ever were.
No doubt. Yeah, and it's a really good point you make. I think there is a great sense of security in being able to lock the door, and you know, I'm sure that particularly if you haven't had that, like you said, when you've had the opposite of that unsafety, if you like, of the street, then it's probably no doubt even more, it feels even more reassuring to you. So I think I don't think it's a harsh point. I think it's very fair and relatable. Thank you, Matt. And Shay, I was going to ask you to comment on that as well, if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course. I guess from the perspective of the voice that I'm bringing today of the kids that I work with, safety and security, I work for a specific family violence service. So safety and security is at the forefront of everything that we do. And it is often the most prominent issue that we find, especially considering the way that things have gone in this virtual space, communicating with people and communicating with children and having them feel like they're safe is a really big issue that we're having at the moment. But it's also, in a more broader perspective, safety and security is everything, especially when you've got children who have been through out-of-home care, and you've got children who have constantly had routines broken. They've had their lifestyles flipped upside down. A lot of children that I work with have a lot of sensory needs, or they might be on the spectrum. They have a lot of different needs that a lot of people don't really understand. And I think that's because of the neglect of the safety and security that they have been brought up around. So I think that in my experience with the people that I work with and the children that display to me, safety and security is kind of intertwined in every aspect of their life. And it is very much so something that's looked at. It's like a lens that's put on top of everything that they search through in life, and that is their comfort. Their safety and security is ensuring that they can then develop and grow to their full potential without the worries of, you know, like a child should not be having to worry if they're safe or if they're secure. They should never have to have those kinds of feelings, but it does happen. And so I think that it's really important to make sure in those environments that, you know, the safety and the comfort is looked at as the most primary goal to try and fulfill for them.
Yes, good point. Very hard to have all the other things that we're talking about if you don't have a sense of that, isn't it? And I really appreciate you bringing the perspective of the children that you're working with, because it's so important for us, if we're talking about home, we need to consider a whole range of different perspectives that we want to bring into the conversation, and I think it's a really unique and very important one to bring to the table. So thank you.
Thank you.
So now we're going to go and talk about family and pets. Before we do that, Ian, is there any contributions from the chat room that you'd like to share?
Yeah, a few actually. Jenny asked after the first discussion about sort of the ideas of the panel about what home is, that she noted that everyone's talked so beautifully about how home is much more than just a house. But her question is, can you have a home without the house or a flat or a secure tenure? Is it possible? So I guess that's a question to anyone who wants to grab it from the panel.
I was just going to say, I've spent a lot of time traveling before I found myself homeless, and I think I've oh, sorry,
You lose your train of thought.
Yeah, no, that's all.
Do you want to have a think about it and come back? Oh, we lost her.
Does anyone else have a feeling about that sort of, I guess, the challenge of a home without the physical space of the four walls and the security of tenure, that knowing that you don't have to leave? Is it possible to make that a home?
I'm happy to talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
I'll talk from my perspective as well as bring in the voice of the people that I work with. I don't think so, to be honest. I think that, yeah, like you can and you can't. Really, you know, they say home is where the heart is. Yes, that's true. But it's nice to have a house to call a home as well. And we all know there's not as much social housing as there should be. And there's a lot of people experiencing homelessness that shouldn't have to because of lack of secure housing and secure tenure. And it's not fair. Everyone should have that safety that we're all discussing, and that security and the feeling of being able, you know, that secure feeling of being able to lock the doors and to sleep comfortably. A lot of people don't have that. That's not fair. Yeah. So, you know, I work in crisis accommodation, and I know what it's like from the people that I work with, from their points of view, what it's like to not have a home and to just want a home, and to see others around you get a home, and you wonder, why not me? When's my turn? Why did they get a home and not me? What's wrong with me that I don't have a home? It's me. You blame yourself that some things that you've done is preventing you from getting housing. It's actually not that at all. So I remind the people that I work with that actually this is a systemic thing. This is a systemic failure that you feel like this. You haven't done anything personally wrong, that your neighbor has received a home or an offer and you haven't yet. So I always have to remind people, like, look at me, like I was you. I've lived in places like this in crisis accom. I've got a home now. You're seeing your neighbours get a home as well because their case managers and AODs workers are working so hard. Yours is as well. You just don't see that. But, you know, rest assured that your turn will come up as well. Like, it's not you haven't done anything wrong. And that is a systemic failure, that people feel that it's their personal failure as a human, that they're not good enough, that they don't deserve a home, and that they won't get a home. It's not fair.
Well, that's a really good point. And it is, I think it was a very strong, no, you can't feel like you have a home without the bricks and mortar and the strength of tenure.
Sorry, Cassandra, just picking that up. Michelle mentioned earlier too that she was thanking Lisa, but also that even with security of tenure, the bricks and mortar is the reminder is that the house doesn't become the home, and that the home is something that even with the lease that you is a goal to work towards, and that the feelings about home can change if those things aren't in place, the security and safety, and that can impact even with a house, your feeling about being a home.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, Joal would know that from an organisational perspective, because she worked in the Peer Support Resettlement Project, and the whole point of that was to work to support people to create a home instead of just having the four walls. And so I think we've all talked, I think it's become quite strong today that you need the four walls, you need the security, you need the tenure, but you also need that emotional and social and connection to that place, which is a whole. I think more of that will come out as we talk more today. Is there anything else that we need to discuss, Ian, before we keep going?
Just Ruth mentioned that it's just lovely to hear people sharing their thoughts about home, and that there's obviously some common themes that are coming up, but it's also a very individual concept, and that it's a very personal concept.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I think that's one of our goals when we were sort of putting the panel together, is that we were purposely trying to bring together individuals with very different experiences and perspectives, so that we could highlight that diversity of individual experiences and connections to home. So let's continue on to the next theme, which is about family and pets, which also came up quite strongly in our discussions. And I'll start with Lisa, who we've already heard from her particular family/pet. How, Lisa, is home for you connected to your pets or family or family? You still there?
Very much so. Everything is like, yeah. They are my family.
Yeah.
Yeah, like without them, I wouldn't have. It's funny enough, like it's the dogs that actually helped me like crinkle out the mental health and whatnot, the finer bits, you know. It was the responsibility of looking after the dogs and whatnot that helped me. So yeah,
and you can see how fond you are. I saw you in meeting yesterday, and you were constantly attending to the dog while you were trying to do a big presentation. I think everyone appreciated the connection there. Thank you. Joal, can I ask you about how home's connected to your family? You've already touched on this a little bit.
Yeah. So as I said, like my greatest connection to home and the feeling of home is my two daughters. And yeah, we've been through a lot. To me and my eldest daughter, we know what it's like to be without a home as well. We were homeless together when she was 6 months old, and she's 12 now. She's nearly 12. She doesn't remember that time, of course, but yeah, we know what it's like not to have that bricks and mortar home and chasing that feeling of a home. So wherever we went, it was never home, but for her sake, I always tried to make it feel like a home. So now that I am securely housed and have been for quite a while, I take great pleasure in making the house feel like a home for my daughter, like setting up her room, buying all of the stuff, getting the colours right, that sort of thing, just so she feels comfortable and not missing out on anything, you know.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's lovely. It's a beautiful way to describe the interconnection that you two both have with home, but also with, of course, your second daughter as well. Shay, can I ask you to talk about family and or pets and what the connection to home is for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it would probably flow on quite well from what Joel was just speaking about. From my own experience, I've also had the same kind of experience when I was younger. My mum and I were without home, and so trying to figure out what home really meant to me, and that homely feeling that I have when I'm with my mum, even still to this day, is very much so important to me. No matter where I am, I think, you know, it can be halfway across the world, and if I get, you know, a message from my mum, it makes me feel like I'm at home. And I think that is a very, you know, it's a special gift to have. And I think if we look throughout the people in all of our lives, I'm sure everyone can think of someone, that there is someone that just makes you feel at home no matter where you are. And I think that really draws in the value of pets as well. Not to compare my mum to a pet, but I think people really undervalue what pets can bring to people's lives, and the kind of comfort, the safety, the security, the feeling that you have something personal to you in your life, and that can, you know, be transferred over into having a home, and sharing a home with them is really important for a lot of people. And then it comes down to the difficulties when it comes to housing and looking for housing in crisis accommodations, in all of these scenarios where people make it really difficult for people with pets to be able to move around. And it's something that in my profession I've noticed, and it really bothers me. And people kind of making the ultimatum that someone might have to give up their pet if they want a home. And I just don't think that is reasonable whatsoever. And that's why I kind of did want to touch on the value, you know, what pets bring to a lot of people in their life. And as we've seen from what Lisa was saying before, it's very prominent in my life. It's been very prominent, and I'm sure in everyone his life who has had a pet before, they can understand what that bond looks like and what it feels like. And I think that it's just really, it's a lot more important that is portrayed, you know, and it's not seen as something that is more of a negative, especially when it comes to housing and things like that. So
yeah, that's a very good point. And I think, you know, it's been a very big problem for a long time. We've had great parody, our parody magazine, which is available on our website, has done some great editions about pets and homelessness, and just really touching stuff that is exactly on that issue, Shay. But let's hope it starts changing, because, I mean, we've got the new residential tenancy laws now that say people can have pets unless the landlord gives a good reason not to. That's a great start. So let's hope it's moving in a positive direction, and being well recognised in that regard. Thank you. Matt, can I get you to talk about family? I mean, you've already touched on it a number of times, but I think that goes to show the strength of asking you the question. Can you talk about your connection to family or pets, and how that interacts with your connection to home?
Yeah, sure. I'll start by giving you a look at this fella. I'll spin the camera around. Can you see him? Can you folks see him?
Oh, yes, we can.
On the couch there. I don't know if you can see him.
He's the size of Lisa's dog. Why haven't I got a horse dog?
Yeah, that's my dog. Did you see him?
Yeah, stop spinning the camera. You're making me dizzy. Yes, he's lovely. What's his name?
That's my son's dog. And the reason I have him is because my son only is living in a condominium, and he can't have the dog in the condominium. So I'm looking after the dog. His name's BJ. And I think having a pet in a home is a good thing, because they're good for security, they're good for safety, they're good for company. They're not very expensive to keep.
Not like humans.
And he's a good fella. He's a good guard dog anyway. Sometimes I go cook at him because he leaves hair on the couch. But he's a good fella.
Yeah.
And I've only got him temporarily. I have had dogs with me when I've been homeless, and they've been a good source of security too. So having a pet in a home gives it a sort of more complete feeling. If you haven't got children, a lot of people look to their pets like being their children.
Yeah.
And I think having a pet is a bonus in life, really, and it's a good thing for a home and a family, because the kids love the dog. The partner usually loves the dog. If it's a good guard dog, keeps her safe, keeps her secure. And that's what I have to say about pets and family.
Good. I think that was all great points, and now your dog's famous, or at least mini famous. Zoom famous. You can tell him when he wakes up.
Cass, can I just jump in? There was a question in the chat room about the reflections on the barriers for people experiencing homelessness with pets. I think we touched on quite a few of them, and the importance of considering how to make it possible for people to keep their pets. Were there any other reflections on that, the barriers for people who might be without a home, and how that could be, about the issue of what happens with their pets?
I can jump in, Ian.
Yep, thanks, Jody.
We had to farm out the cat and dog to different locations, and that was for not only living in the van but using crisis accommodation. But even so, when we got the transitional housing property allocated, it stipulated on the lease that there were no pets allowed. So we needed to work through a process with the general practitioner and a few other bits and pieces to get an exemption on my lease to be able to have them on the property while we're in that transitional.
Thanks, Jody. It's a real issue, and it's part of people's family, obviously, and families shouldn't have to separate because of housing issues. So it's definitely one to note is important, and to hopefully all of us keep working on. I'd like to talk about the children's perspective, and I'm going to start with you, Shay, because you're particularly bringing that to the table. Do you have an insight into how the children you work with see home, and what their perspective might be on home?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's definitely very different range to range. I've worked in a bunch of different Aboriginal community controlled organisations where I've worked with families as a whole. I've worked with children separately. I've done some youth mentoring. And I think in just those categories, the meaning of home is very different. I think that particularly because I work in a cultural setting, home can mean a lot of different things. It can mean having your feet on country. It can mean having connection to your mob. It can mean just having an understanding of what the culture should mean to you, connection to elders, things like that. Even connections to last names and family trees serve a lot of fulfillment for a lot of people. People often feel like they don't quite, even if they're in a home or they feel like they're comfortable, there's this weird space that they sit in culturally that they don't quite understand. And then when you kind of fill those gaps with all of these little things, they really start to feel a lot more holistically at home, which I think is an interesting concept, because home does mean so many things. But from the children, I definitely think the main thing is that children need places to be able to adapt around them, and for them to not be forced to adapt to their environments.
Yeah.
I think that is something that I've noticed the most, and that, many kids, especially in the out-of-home care or foster care space, will move around from many different homes, whether it be foster or kinship, and you see that they need that sense of familiarity, and they cannot be changing their lifestyles as young children who are going through significant developmental traumas to be able to be expected to adapt themselves to every different environment that they go into. So I think home for them, it's a lot of things, sensory stuff. So feeling comfortable, feeling soft, having smells that remind them of home, pictures that remind them of home. And we make a really big effort to make sure that our kids know where they come from and they can go back to their, their place on country. They can go back to wherever they need to be, where their family is from. And if that's not something that can be done, we kind of work on that internally with them and work more on an identity scale. But
like
home,
the family tree idea.
Yeah, exactly, like working on that. And even we have kind of a mini program that's kind of being integrated, that's more around what, like, you create your identity wherever you go. You don't have to know exactly where you come from, especially with the stolen generation. It's really hard to track back. And which is something that I'm currently experiencing in my own life at the moment, as some of you may know. So there are many roadblocks that come up. Being able to adapt around these kids and to still be able to provide them what they need to be able to develop, healthily. I think that has to be the key that I bring to this conversation. I think it's really important.
Thank you. It's a really good point. There's so much stuff in there. It's really interesting, although I've at first found it really interesting that you're saying, things like filling the gaps culturally for them is really helping them to grow that holistically. As you say, there's so many people who can't have that because of stolen generation and, other successive issues. And so then how do you culturally help someone grow holistically? And I really take your point that, services or organisations that are connecting with these kids really need to adapt to them. We need to start really, instead of just throwing around the word person-centred practice, is actually walk the talk. So thank you for that. That's great. Joal, can I get you to comment on the children's perspective? Do you have a sense of your kids, how they see home?
I think my kids see home as a safe space where they can just be themselves. No one's going to hurt them. No one's going to judge them. They can be safe. They've got mum there as protector, like, say if they go to grandma's house, they've got to watch what they say and be sort of perfect. And, but at home they can be themselves. And I just let them be how they are,
Oh, that's lovely. Isn't it nice to have a place where you can just be who you are? That's a lovely sense of home. It's we all put on different masks when we're out in public, depending on what we're doing. So it's nice to take it off when we get home. Yeah,
but I also have the perspective of experiencing homelessness as youth as well.
Yeah. And do you want to share something about that?
Yeah, if that's okay. Like, I know what it's like to be a child and not have a home. So like when I hear Shay talk, I'm like, oh, good work, Shay. Like, doing such good work in the sector, like amazing work. And you do feel so like out of whack when you're a kid and you don't have a home. And then, what do you have to stand on? And then being a teen and trying to do my year 11 and 12 and trying to go to school but be homeless at the same time and not have a secure place to live. Try to do year 11 and 12 and then getting my first lease at like 17, and then I'm still a child, and I'm still trying to go to school, but I'm trying to be and live an adult life,
So how do you make that a home when you're only 17?
How do you make it a home when you're only 17? So I just had to grow up pretty fast and basically try to be responsible. Even though I was at an age where you're just so irresponsible.
And how did you go? Were you a success at establishing a home at that age, regardless of how irresponsible you were?
Depends what you want to call success, but I think I was pretty good. Like, I still went and did my year 11 and 12. I still worked, because I was like, I'm not living this life
Yeah.
with nothing. Like, I'm gonna work hard. And that's what I've done ever since I had my first lease at like 17.
Yeah, well, sounds like success to me, Joel.
Yeah.
Don't give yourself enough credit.
Thanks, Cass.
Thank you. I'm going to ask a couple of people to talk about community, but first, Ian, is there anything you wanted to contribute from the chat room?
Yeah, there was a question from Michelle for Shay. How can homelessness workers assist in facilitating a sense of home in a cultural context for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and children?
And that's a great question. And I think that's something that we're still working on. And I think that we're definitely trying to bring the mainstream view a bit more over our way at the moment. We see that there's a lot of gaps in supporting our community and what that looks like, because the differences, like, everyone knows that there are differences, but the differences are so vast and so diverse and really not understood by a lot of other people in the sectors. And I think that that's a real issue, but I think there's also a big issue that there are not enough Aboriginal community controlled organisations being accessed or by people who are within our community, because they're not aware of them. I think that, and I come from a very small organisation. My organisation, when I started there, which was only at the beginning of this year, was about 13 people total. And we cover the outer east and the inner east, and we cover a lot of community. So, and the fact is that a lot of people who come to us after years of using mainstream services and going, oh my gosh, I can't believe I didn't know that this was here for me, because it works so much better. We have, all of my team is all identified Aboriginal staff, we are in the process of recruiting new identified staff. All of our positions that go out at the moment are all required to be identified, which I think is a massive step forward, because even in a lot of different ACOs, there are not enough Aboriginal staff, and I've noticed that from working in a lot of different areas. And not that that is a setback, because I think that it is absolutely possible for people to be culturally appropriate and sensitive without actually having to be a part of the culture. But from a perspective of an Aboriginal person who would be using a service system, the comfort of having someone there who does just understand it from that level is actually makes a huge difference on how they're going to have the service delivered for them.
Yeah, so maybe there's a whole lot of work to be done about trying to encourage Aboriginal people into the social services space and helping them see the value in that, and making sure that there's good career progression for people if they take that opportunity. And that's probably a whole other big conversation.
It really is.
Yes, and I'm sure you could talk about this forever, but I'm going to just jump ahead a little bit because of time. One of the strongest topics that came up when we were planning this was identity. And I'd hate for us to run out of time and not be able to talk about it. So I'm going to jump to that just to make sure we don't miss it. I've got you on my screen, Shay, so I may as well start with your question and then I'll go to the others. You talked about sensory items, but can you talk a bit more about physical and sensory items and how they are important to a sense of identity?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and like many people have discussed already today, identity means a lot of different things, and in my context, it means a lot of different things. Sensory is something that I've come and was very new to me at the beginning of my career, and working in a space where I work with a lot of children who have experienced a lot of trauma. And due to this trauma, coming out of that, there are symptoms of sensory issues, which can lead to a lot of distress, a lot of further trauma, if the child isn't feeling like they're getting the things that they need to be comforted and to be safe and secure. This can go for a lot of different levels. I mean, in the counselling room that I have at my office, which I can't use at the moment, but it's there, we have what we call like therapy pods, which are made of like sensory, like these foam inside them, that when kids actually sit in them, it's almost like getting a nice little massage. It's like very relaxing. We have fiddle boxes on the table so that kids can always have things in their hands to be touching, which sometimes people disagree with because they think it takes away from the focus. But if you look at it from a broader perspective, they actually get a lot more, they absorb a lot more when they're doing things like that. They might not project, but they do absorb. Having sensory items, I think we can all, like when you're a child and you have that one teddy or you have that blankie that has a smell of someone on it that you know, might be your mum, might be your caregiver, it could be, you know, a pet, it could be anything of those senses. And having that creates this kind of mental sense of comfort, which we've discussed a little bit about being just as important as the physical. They really need to go hand in hand. So I think, yeah, having a sensory aspect to anything, especially when you're working with kids, but also adults. It's not just limited to children at all.
It's very healing, can't it? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, you know, just think of that one item that you like holding all the time, or that one blanket that you love to have on you, or the weight of something on you and how calm that can make you feel. And think of how heightened that is for children who have been through and experienced significant trauma.
Yeah, thanks.
I think I'll leave you to kind of ponder that a bit.
Yeah, no, that's a wonderful illustration. And we can all remember being children, but I think you make a good point that whether it's a child or an adult, when you've been through trauma, those sensory things, something that people may not always think of as being not a solution, a helping hand.
Yes.
When you're on your journey out of that trauma. I'm going to go to Aliya, who I haven't seen on the screen for a while. I'm missing your head. Can I ask you to talk about the same thing?
Yeah.
Physical and sensory items that might make you feel that your identity is reflected in your home.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I grew up every few years because of my, you know, father's job. I had to move countries, and I never really knew when we would sort of be packing up and going somewhere else. And so for me, everywhere I went, you know, there'd be something physical. There would be some sort of physical manifestation, like some sort of physical, you know, whether it was a soft toy or, you know, like a picture frame or, you know, something small that I would take with me from each place. Because while I felt like I was being so transient, moving around so many different places, I needed something to kind of ground me, I guess, and remind me that there was a, you know, something physical that reminded me of, I guess, my transient journey. So for me, you know, moving around, and no matter where I went, you know, even when I like lived out of a suitcase for many months, and, you know, in between, I guess, leases and sort of moving around, I always had just a little kind of handful of things that I would take with me, because it would kind of remind me and ground me where I was. And I think that it's really interesting, because even when I moved to Australia by myself, you know, when I was 18, and my mother, she kind of gave me all these things that I could, you know, she's like, you can use this and put this up when you have your, you know, when you have your lease and you have your home. And I didn't have one at that point. I was, you know, still applying for different places, and I was struggling to get leases in a few places. And I was sort of dealing with a bit of institutional racism from other people who were, you know, didn't want to necessarily live with me because I was different and I wasn't, you know, I was a bit foreign. And so it was interesting that even when I was sort of in temporary short-term accommodation places, I still kind of felt relatively centered if I had close access to those little knickknacks that my mom had given me. And it kind of also gave me that bit of hope, I think, to be like, okay, well, one day I will then have my home, and I can hang up these nice paintings, and I can hang up these things. And it was sort of it gave me a bit more direction.
Do you have, is there are they like all your little children, or do you have a favorite that's in your house?
Well, my little child is definitely my cat. That's something that I can absolutely relate to. But I think there are a few things. I've got a few kind of like handcrafted, you know, like Pakistani, like you know, sculptures and stuff that that my mom's given me that she's handed down, sort of, I guess, from her family. And so I kind of have, it's just like one or two small things, but they always hold a bit of prominence no matter where I am, whether it's in just a room or whether it's in, you know, like a bigger house, as long as I have close access to it.
Oh, that's lovely. Isn't it nice to be able to take something special with you on that journey? You've hopped around so much. It's nice to have something, as you say, that grounds you like that. I can really relate to that. We used to hop around a bit when I was a kid too. Can I ask you, while you're still there, and maybe this is the same question, but maybe not. Is how do you reflect your identity in your home? Is it beyond those things, or?
Yeah, I think for me, a big part of, particularly in sort of South Asian, Pakistani culture, and I'm sure in many other cultures as well, food is like one of the big things that really connects me to my like kind of ancestral home, I guess. So my like Pakistani heritage. And so for me, having sort of a kitchen where I can sort of cook a lot of food from home and, you know, comfortable food that my grandmother's taught me from when I was a kid, that's a really big part of being able to feel comfortable and safe in a home. Like I mentioned before, it created a bit of tension in the past, in the sense that sometimes I had to forfeit a bit of that part of my identity when I was, you know, living in certain share houses because of the, I guess, the foreignness or the difference that it would kind of have, and, you know, the kind of, I guess, racism that kind of comes with that. So when I eventually did move into my own place by myself, that was, I think, one of my greatest triumphs, was I was able to finally like cook a whole sort of meal for myself that was really a reflection of my family and my culture. And it did it came at a cost. It came at a cost of, you know, losing the stability of a comfortable share house for a while. But you know, at the end of the day, I think it was the way that I was able to be the most, I guess, authentically.
Yeah. Oh God, what a torn position to be in. Your favourite food, or your, with these, you know, racist housemates, or do you get, you know, quiet comfort without the food? I just, it's, people can be awful, can't they?
Yeah.
But I'm so happy for you that you got a space where you can cook to your heart's content now. And I'm not gonna ask you about your favourite dish, but I won't, because you'll make me hungry. All right, thank you, Aliya. Jody and Lisa, I'm going to quickly come to you about identity before we move on. We're nearly out of time. Lisa, can I ask you to talk about how your home influences your sense of identity? You've talked about this quite strongly, I think, on one of the videos that we worked on.
Yeah, I think it gives you a...
Is your video, is your thing playing up? You there?
Yeah, it's, oh yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep. I think the sense, sorry, can you put me back on, Cass?
Yeah.
What am I answering?
Oh, sorry. How does home influence your sense of identity? Let me just take you back to when we were talking in that video about how you felt when you first got your home after you hadn't had one for so long. And you had started talking about being in a community where you're paying bills and you're taking the bins out, and, you know, how that influenced how you felt about yourself.
Just before you answer that, Lisa, could you maybe pop your camera off, because your audio is crackling, and that will stop that. So thank you.
No problem. Yeah, I think being, I was a drug user for 20 plus years. So I've never really sort of looked at myself as a valid member of society, you know. And I think having a home, having that stability, having the foundation, I think that helps, gives you an identity. I mean, like, my home is my identity. It's my sanity. Yeah, it's it's a lot of things. Sorry.
Yeah, no, those are great points, and I appreciate it. And I think it was I found it really interesting when you talked about it, and you said, you know, that, like, it was significant to you that you're a person who takes their bins out. And I thought, oh, isn't it funny? I've never really, you know, never really seen it.
Well, it's just the same, I think, too, with housework. Like, my friends and that look at me like weird. I enjoy it.
Yeah.
I do. because I actually make time. I'm like, I'm going to wash today. And I've never had that. I've never had the home to fuss over. I've never had to, stay up till midnight, get the dishes done or whatever. I've never had that stress. So having that, it just kind of validates like, you're on the right track. You're doing the right things. The hard work must be paying off because you are at home doing the mundane every day, putting the bins out. I take my dogs for a walk down the street. We've got people that recognise me now and, they're familiar with me. I mean, I've left that behind, but it was nice and it's something I'm going to work towards again. But just being that, just being part of a community.
Yeah, that's it. Thanks, Lisa. You've explained that really well, and maybe we'll all appreciate the mundane things a little bit more now. Oh no, I've done that one. So I'm just going to, we've touched on culture, which was the next section. Before I go there, Ian, is there any comments from the chat about identity?
Not specifically about identity. There was a question from Kim Lee about the section with the recent Close the Gap that Shayla's responded to her, which we probably won't have time for, which is a pretty big question, but the question about the new National Agreement on Closing the Gap introducing a housing target by 2031, 88% living in appropriately sized housing. Thoughts, is this enough? That would be, Shay's responded to Kim, but I think that's a great question. And in case we don't get it toward the end, we're looking to have a number of these sorts of conversations. And so if organisations want to get in touch about organising them, then that might be one that we could have a conversation about. Yes, we could do one specifically around culture or Aboriginal responses. And please, I'll touch on it at the end, but we are open to ideas about further conversation events. I guess we've heard from Shayla and Aliya about cultural aspects in relation to home. Matt, I wanted to see if you had something to add to that as far as, from a cultural perspective, what home means, from an Aboriginal perspective, what home means for you. Matt? Do we still have Matt? Yeah?
He's muted.
Oh, you're muted, Matt.
Unmute yourself. What are you doing?
I can't see you.
I can see you there.
Can you hear us, Matt? You're on mute.
I'll unmute him. There you go. I'm the boss.
You all. But from a cultural perspective, the land is our home. The land, traditionally speaking, from a cultural point of view, the land has always been our home. And living off the land is something that you learn from your family and your teachers, your uncles, your aunties, culturally. Yeah. Home is the land. My land is near Townsville, up in Queensland, just south of Townsville.
Yeah, right.
And
have you been there?
Dull, man.
Have you been there, Matt?
Yes, I have. Yes, I have been. Yes, I have been to my homeland, luckily and thankfully. And what can I say about it, really?
Can I ask you?
Said, the land. Yeah.
Can I ask you, when you did go when you returned to your country, did you feel a stronger connection to that area?
My country drew me to it. My home country drew me to it. Yeah. I was going to get married to a girl, and I didn't want to get married, so I nicked off. And where I nicked off to, without me knowing, was my homeland, which was up Bowen, Pine, Eyre, Home Hill, all around there. In the mouth of the Burdekin River, there's a little island called Regia Island, and that's where my ancestors were living. And that's where I went, without me knowing, I went back to that land. So the land called me home, and I went home to it. And you learn all about the land from your uncles and aunties, and they teach you what you can eat and what you can't eat, where you can go and where you can't go, what you can do and what you can't do. And it's a real spiritual feeling. You feel it in your heart when you're back on land. You feel how much a part of that land you are.
It makes me, you express this beautiful, happy, warm feeling, almost like the sensory pod Shay was talking about. But I just think it's so sad that a lot of people can't get that because they, they're not sure where their land is. But thanks very much for sharing that. I appreciate that. Look, because we're probably going to have to start wrapping up a little bit because the time is not being very friendly to us. So should I maybe sort of start the finishing point, if you like, by asking each of you if you'd like to add a further comment about home, something that you feel that is important to say that you haven't had a chance to share? Shall I maybe start you in order? Because I know otherwise you get this deadly silence until someone dares speak. Matt, is there anything extra that you would like to add?
Just that home's really one of the best things in life you can experience. Family and home, they go hand in hand. And it's one of the greatest things you can have is a place to call home and a family to have in that home. I wanted to say something. I had this picture in my gallery on my phone that says something like, having a home is a really good thing. Having someone to share that home with, having family in that home is a blessing. Something along those lines. I did send it to you, Cassandra, at one point, a little picture that I had. I can't get it up right now. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, no, I think that's a lovely thought and really echoes a lot of the points that were made today. So still threading it together.
Family home go hand in hand, I reckon.
Yeah, no, I like it. Thank you. Who have we got next? Lisa, is there anything else that you would like to add to the discussion?
No, I just I'm like, it's I'm new to all this, so I've got a lot that I want to say, and I've got a lot of thoughts on it, but it's hard at the moment just because of my mindset and everything that's going on. Yeah. And I know when things settle down, probably have bit better conversations and whatnot. I appreciate that everyone's so forthcoming with their experience and just touch on some hard stuff. So thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. Before I keep going to the panel, can I just remind the audience that we are encouraging you to participate with us, and we're about to wrap up. So if anyone has any profound or not profound thoughts about home, that we would really love to hear from you. Until then, I will move on to Shayla's next on my list. Is there anything else that you would like to add?
I think everything's been covered a lot. I just wanted to say from, my perspective, from someone who's had a home, someone who hasn't had a home, someone who's moved out of home, establishing my own home, helping other people establish their homes. I get it. I really do get it. And everyone deserves one. And I think that really needs to be drilled through. And I appreciate everyone's perspectives today. I think it's been really fulfilling, and it's shed a lot of light on things that aren't shed a lot of light on very often. So I just really appreciate everyone sitting and listening and absorbing everything that we've produced today. It's been really incredible. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with everything that you just said too. Aliya, you're next on my list. Would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think just similarly sort of reiterate that, like, it's there's sort of two things, right, that sort of Joel kind of touched on as well, that home is both the physical place of having somewhere safe physically to spend the night, you know, to live in, but then also that cultural element of having it be a safe place for you to, you know, I guess, be your most authentic self.
Yeah.
And I think that really does emphasize, like, that does highlight, like, how important it is to have more housing that's available for people, but also more support for people, so that they can then maintain an existing homes. Because the last thing you want is, you know, people who have spent so much time making a home having to leave because it's unsafe. And so just, I guess, freeing up that support and actual accommodation and housing. How important it is to have those two things hand in hand.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Aliya. That you've just, I think you've just sort of harked back really well to the Homelessness Week theme, which is everybody needs a home. And before I tie things up and offer the other two panel members an opportunity, I just want to remind people that we have the Everybody's Home campaign that everyone can sign up to. There's some clever, worthwhile, very logical asks in that campaign that I think, you know, are very easy to put your name to be honest with you. So please have a look at that on the website. And to bear in mind that people from our peer education support program, which are a large number of this panel today, can be engaged for future events by contacting CHP, and me in particular, but CHP generally. And that we will be having more conversations events beyond this, and happy to take suggestions about what topics you might like to hear us focus things on. And then just before I wrap up, I would have two more members of the panel I would like to offer a chance to say one last thing. Joel, is there anything you'd like to add?
I guess I wanted to quickly say about my time in the peer support resettlement project pilot that I was involved with the CHP and Launch Housing. My whole job as peer support worker and someone with lived experience, my whole role was to connect people who have just moved into a home after a long-term rough sleeping and connect them into community as well. So connecting into the home, but also that outer, you know, get your feelers out into the community so you could feel connected to something more than just that home as such. And it's very difficult when you've experienced trauma to, you know, find that connection back to self, because you do lose so much a part of yourself when you've experienced homelessness, and to find that connection to community. I feel that peer workers are a great niche. The lived experience roles aren't enough in the community, in the sector, and peer support workers are kind of the way forward, I think, into filling that gap, into support, to connect people who've experienced homelessness back into their homes and community.
Absolutely. And I look forward to seeing Joel. And I would have liked to go into that a bit more today if we'd had time, but CHP is absolutely trying to, after the success of that project, working to promote the establishment of further peer support roles in this sector, because it is a vital role, and we absolutely not only acknowledge that, but would like to see those developed in a capacity building way. Jody, we've got enough time to offer you a chance to say something before we thank everyone and say goodbye to our beautiful audience.
I was just reflecting on everything that's been said, and I think there was so much in my mind that was focused on, do we have the house? Yes. Is the gas on? Yes. Is there a bus route around the corner? Yes. That was actually looking at everything from a very outward perspective. I think the thing that was the key for me to become more happier in what I was living in was my role as a volunteer in the peer education support program, where we talked about things, what worked, what didn't work, what made me feel good, what didn't, and starting all those conversations, because I was very unaware that I didn't really know what I liked or what I didn't like. And that was the biggest journey for me, was discovering what made me happy, and then start bringing more and more things into my life, whether they were physical or emotional, bringing things into my home and into my community and into the involvements that I had, that actually was more about happiness and not feeling guilty about waking up every day and smiling and everyone saying, oh, you're always so happy. Yeah, so I think that's one of the major changes. And I think that everyone around me has benefited from me having a much more positive outlook on life as well.
Oh, no doubt. And isn't it lovely to be able to be in a place where you know, allow yourself to do that too. Goodness knows you deserve it, Jody. Thank you.
That's just a really quick couple of comments.
Yeah.
Sorry, just a couple of great comments that I just wanted to share from the audience. There's lots of people thanking those who've shared their personal things, but also that there's some thoughts about in this difficult time in terms of that not everyone's necessarily safe at home, and that we should be really conscious of that. And I think that's a really important message, that safety is critical, and that not everyone at the moment is feeling safe. So for that to be in our mind, and there's a lots of really, as I say, some lovely comments to the people in the panel who have shared so warmly, and I share their gratitude as well.
Thank you. And we, you know, in turn would like to thank the audience as well. Particular thanks to our brilliant panel, that you've all been incredible today, and the comments you've made have really resonated. I know they have for me, and I'm sure they have for so many other people, but you've also brought perspectives that I think a lot of people can learn from. Again, I can only talk for myself, but I'm sure that other people have learned something from some unique perspectives you brought to the table, and I really appreciate you bringing that to the conversation today. I think we're about ready to wrap up. It's Jenny would be pleased, that's on the dot. So thank you very much, everyone, not anyone, and we hope to see you again in the future.